I feel like I need to defend my scene's honor here, because this is just turning into a bit of a dogpile.
Like in groups always look.
I'm cutting you off here. I'm cutting you off. Cutting you off. He said G2's winning it. He said G2's winning it.
We need to wait till the next EU tournament, which could be in about 10 years now.
Take it with like a grain of salt.
No,
but
that's
that
no
being
fun.
said,
Take it super literally.
Spike defused.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Press Forward to Defuse, your site for Valorant esports news. We've got a lot to break down from First Strike this weekend, so let me go ahead and without further ado, introduce my co-hosts. We've got Sam, we've got Ryan. How are you two doing today?
Waiting for Sam to respond because
There
usually
we go.
Dude,
It's a standoff. It's a Mexican standoff here.
That's the thing, though. It's so
I should
awkward.
start
I
doing- I should
blame
start
Mike for
introducing
this
you one by
100%.
I'll start.
Please do.
I'll come up with some like.
we don't have
adjectives.
time. This has to be like a speedrun episode.
All right,
got
there we
so
go.
much
We're
to get
getting
through,
into
so
it.
let's
We're getting into it. They're both doing
go.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and
Yeah.
talk about First Strike, starting out with the NA side of things. We've got a lot to get to. We don't have that much time, folks. North American First Strike concluded. It was pretty spicy. All sorts of wonderful things happened. Let's talk. So I've got the first round up on screen, and that's the second day as well up. These are just some handy-dandy graphics provided by them. 100 Thieves won the event, but let's start from the beginning. The first round went pretty much according to plan. We had Envy triumphing over Immortals, TSM triumphing over Renegades, Sentinels beating FaZe, 100 Thieves beating T1. Is there anything we wanted to highlight there? Is there anything that was in particular interesting, or did this pretty much just hit the roadmap? Ryan, why don't you start us out?
I think we can give like a most improved award to T1. I was genuinely impressed with how they played, and they lost against a team that ended up winning, right? So as soon as Spider came into that team, we saw them in the Nerd Street Renegades tournament a couple of months ago now at this point, and they looked lost. It was a team that couldn't really execute onto a site at all. They had Spider just playing in the same spot 9 times out of 10 times. It was crazy how he was just sort of stuck on sell a wine even for Ascent as an example. But now they look so much better. Him on Raze as a duelist actually looks really strong, and with there being a lot of roster changes at the moment, I really don't think T1 need to change up much. Maybe for the other teams that failed to qualify, FaZe Clan for example, might be a couple of players that you want to get in and drop some others. But T1, I think that this is the most improved team that we've seen across the globe. And I think in a couple of months' time, certainly going to Challengers, Masters, and then Champions, this could be a team that actually, contends for top 5 at that point.
Yeah, I was actually going to touch on T1 as well and just say that I found it somewhat surprising that they weren't able to at least take a map. If I look at the scorelines here, they were incredibly close. It was 13-10, both maps, obviously in favor of 100 Thieves. So it was very, very close. I think I would have expected them to have at least taken one map. But aside from that, quarterfinals went as expected. I think maybe the same for FaZe Clan. I would have thought maybe they could have taken a map, particularly given how Sentinels didn't do too hot in the next round, which we'll get to. But yeah, aside from that, quarterfinals telegraphed exactly what we were expecting coming into the North American scene.
Fortunately, for the sake of interesting drama, once we get past the quarterfinals, that is definitely not the case. Into day 3 or I guess it was day 3 where this started to come up.
Yes.
Yep. Oh, what have I just done? I've just hit the wrong
What have
button.
I clicked? Stories of the internet.
Everything's fine. Oh,
We good?
maybe.
I feel like it's not fine. Did you just kill this
fine.
screen?
I feel like I need to defend my scene's honor here, because this is just turning into a bit of a dogpile. Gone fully haywire. All right, we should be fine now. May have played. Don't worry about it, folks. Everything's fine. Nothing just totally blew up. Everything's fine. I didn't break everything. Don't worry about it. Don't look too close. Don't worry about it. There we go. There's the day 2. That's what I was trying to get going. High quality production here on Press Forward to Defuse, where all the production is done by yours
Want
truly.
to buy a new producer?
So TSM, I mean, that's what I want for Christmas, is someone to take production off my hands, because I am terrible at this. TSM over Team Envy and 100 Thieves over Sentinel. Now, I was a huge Envy truther coming into this. I thought Envy were going to take it. I think, Ryan, you were there with me on that.
Yeah.
Disappointing result for Envy, but TSM kind of back at it. That strong powerhouse team that we knew from earlier in I mean, from back in like June, July, where they kind of faded off and then they were kind of up and down and here and there. This is looking like that TSM of yore. Sam, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I was one of the few people that still had faith in TSM, especially given how they had been performing in most recent events. But there was something about the most recent event, I can't remember what it was. It might have just been the qualifiers where we had seen TSM and I felt like, all right, they're starting to make something happen here. They weren't quite at the same level that they had been coming up to First Strike, but it felt like they were moving in the right direction. Now, I've been a big fan of Envy recently, particularly, and I bring this up like every time we talk about Envy, I talk about Crashes and Food, because wow, that was a massive level up. But as much as I was a huge fan of bringing them onto the roster, I still didn't feel that they kind of lived up to TSM's power. And TSM just kind of proved that, right? I kind of expected them to be in that grand final, and they managed to make it through there. What really surprises me, and again, it's exactly what I said about the quarterfinal matches, Envy didn't even take a map. And if you look at the score lines, it wasn't even close. Like, TSM were leagues ahead. It was a 13-7 and a 13-5. That is massive. I really, really expected Envy to put up much more of a fight there. As much as I thought that TSM were on top, I really was like, Envy? You guys, you good?
It was a bit of a shocker. Ryan, any thoughts on that particular matchup?
Yeah, I think at least for like Split, you would have expected a bit more from Envy, who were 5-1 at that stage. TSM's ascent is pretty strong anyway, so like that I can understand, but you really expect a team of Envy's caliber to come in and really try to do some damage on a map like Split that takes a bit more of a different approach, and some teams really struggle to play on it. But TSM deserved to be in the finals. I think they looked so much more consistent and stronger and showed that they are still a top team. It was a perfect performance from them, really, to silence a lot of those people that assumed that this team had dropped off quite a bit. So I was super stoked to see them in, and Envy still have potential to be the best team in North America, but we just didn't see that in that game.
Mm-hmm. Now, talking about the other matchup here between Sentinels and 100 Thieves. Sentinels considered by many to be the best team in the region. The team that was always memeing about playing for seeding and drinking White Claws while they were playing the tournament and this, that, and the other thing. Coming in with maximum bravado, maximum swagger, maximum trash talk. They got beaten by 100 Thieves, who are, when you look at these four remaining semifinalists, kind of still the new kids on the block, right? Like, they were a team that hasn't been around for that long, that we were still talking about them gelling, and they come out and they beat Sentinels to make it to that finals. That's pretty spicy. I mean, pretty spicy indeed. Ryan, you want to start that one out for us?
Yeah, I mean, for Sentinels, there were obviously extenuating circumstances going on there for the team that's...
Yeah.
And even the stuff beforehand with Sinatra not being able to practice for 2 weeks. It was just 100 Thieves really coming in on top. It was a great series, like an actual sort of close game. And really, with the first map being on Icebox and it going to overtime, that really could have gone either way, because I don't think any team in North America, certainly after watching Vision Strikers playing that map in the Korean finals, I don't think that it's particularly convincing. So really, that could just, a couple of rounds could be the difference there. Everything else, though, felt like it was a bit closer. Haven is popularly a very promising map for Sentinels. And again, I feel a Bind could go either way. So I think 100 Thieves, this felt more like the final than the TSM game did. And I think that even Sentinels, with all of the stuff that's going on with them personally, and the fact that we never really got to see them practice all that much, and even the fact that they look so shaky in the qualifiers in those all-important matches, looked decent, but 100 Thieves were just the better across the tournament and deserved to win it, both in this game and then up against TSM.
Yeah.
I think when you take those extenuating circumstances into consideration, so obviously that's something that would kind of pull them down a little bit. Not massively, of course, they managed to make it to the semifinals. They pushed 100 Thieves to the very limit, but it did clearly affect their performance. But at the same time, you know, when you look at the flip side of the coin, 100 Thieves, they were a team that we'd been watching quite closely from the very first announcement that things were starting to change. They dropped the entire roster, they held on to Hiko, and then the big signings started coming in with Nitro, and slowly the rest of the players started to be announced, and we had our eyes on them. And it felt like a fairly short time span for them to jump into first strike, and there was that big fear of like, do they have the time? Are they going to be able to build up the synergy? Are they going to be able to work together? I think it was Nitro or Steel. I can't remember exactly who it was, but one of them was streaming right after being announced, like, what does this ability do, kind of thing, you know? And it was clearly like
It's probably
a new
Nitro.
foray.
He came over from CS immediately into
Yeah.
the team.
So it was clearly like a brand new foray into this, and there was like a lot of concern around that. And they came into their first couple of matches, and not necessarily in First Strike, but just in general, like coming into their first couple of matches, and looked good, but didn't have everyone convinced. And as First Strike continued on, they managed to get that practice in. They managed to gel a little bit better. Even coming through the qualifiers, they were already looking to be on a massive tear. And I'll be the first to admit, when we sat here last week and spoke about it, I was Sentinels all the way. I truly believed that they were going to take this semi-final and they were going to run through to the finals and win the whole thing. I didn't expect 100 Thieves to push them this hard, but damn if I'm not impressed. For a team that's been together for such a short amount of time to have been able to overtake Sentinels and then go on to win out the entire thing, props to 100 Thieves. And honestly, I can't wait to see what they bring in the future, because this, more than anything else, is one of those like spurring moments for other teams. Like, yo, this team came out of nowhere. Now we really need to up our game, because now there are 3 Titans ahead of us and we're just falling behind. So I really want to see what this is going to do for the North American scene.
I think what I'm most encouraged by, and I think this is just going to segue us into the finals, because we continue to talk about 100 Thieves, because their performance was so incredible in that finals as well. This is one of the teams that's been most deliberately constructed, if that makes sense. It was built by Hiko, pretty much. Obviously, after the first High Grounds experiment failed, and they decided to axe the team but keep Hiko, they were like, okay, you get much more input in how we build this team going forward. And you could see how deliberately they constructed it. Bringing over Nitro, he obviously, as you said, when he first came over, he didn't have any experience in Valorant, but he was a top-tier player in Counter-Strike for a long time. And, you know, really one of the best that North America has ever been able to offer. Then you have Steel coming in. That's another big brain NACS player who is limited by factors far outside of his gameplay and what he could achieve in CS. And then you pick up the 2 young guns who they bought from Immortals. So that was a very deliberate move. It wasn't like these guys are available. No, they wanted these 2 players. They went out and they acquired them for genuine buyouts. I think the number's like 100K for the 2 of them, something in that range. Actually, I might be wrong. No, I think that's what it was. So that was a very deliberately constructed roster. They invested into this, and it worked the way it was supposed to. You have the big brains, the veterans coming over who are playing. You've got the experienced lurker Clutchmeister and Hiko, who played out of his mind, by the way, I want to say. As someone who's doubted Hiko in the past, seeing his Counter-Strike career kind of wane into a streaming career, that man played lights out. And then you had the 2 young guns popping off. Dicey and the Operator was incredible. Asuna as an entry. I mean, there was that quote that came out about how he when he satcheled towards the Raze rocket, how he would die so that he could watch his boomers to clutch every time. The team worked perfectly, and I think that's incredible. I think that that's a great sign that instead of sort of milling about and hoping that you get lucky, being very deliberate with your team construction and thinking it through pays off.
Yeah, it was just a great individual performance, but the way that they played as a team, nobody had a bad game for 100 Thieves. And even with TSM sort of showing up the way that they did, it was just a great game. It's more the fact, I suppose, that Split and Bind, Split especially went into overtime, and then Bind was 13-11. It was more, I guess, a difficult approach from then on out for TSM. They won on Ascent, which they should do, but I think by that point, the damage had already been done. It's a game that I'm certainly going to have another watch over again, because it was such a long day of Valorant, especially after the EU finals as well for me. So it was just a really good showing. It peaked viewership. Everybody was super hype about this game, and it really does show the exceptional levels that you can get from a Valorant final. And even then, the final wasn't really that close when you look at the actual scoreline. So other than the first 2 maps, of course, everything else pretty much played out perfectly for 100 Thieves.
Yep. fairly close score lines. We kind of that first map that went into overtime and it was looking like it could have been anyone's game, and then 100 Thieves just kind of went, actually no. And even the second match was fairly close as well, with only a 2-point differential, and then TSM managing to win out that fourth map, and that's when it's kind of like a team realizes, okay, we gotta put a stop to this, especially when you know you're a match point, right? You're 3 maps deep. You know that if you win the next map, you win the entire series, you win the tournament, you win the first major Riot tournament. Like, yeah, okay, that's a bit of a motivator there. So I'm impressed. I'm incredibly impressed. I gave my my whole spiel about 100 Thieves when we were still talking about the semis. So not much more to add to that than what I already said. Just, yeah, looking forward to seeing what's going to come next, and really hoping to see how much more TSM can grow, because we saw that they were really good. They lulled a bit, and now they're starting to climb up a little bit more now that they've realized that other teams are going to be pushing them. So I want to see if they can keep up that momentum, or if they just kind of slide back now. Maybe demotivation hits them. Who knows? We'll see what comes next. Riot, next announcement when?
I mean, we know what's coming eventually. But eventually.
Champions.
I do have one last question before we head over to EU, because we're gonna hop across the pond and talk about EU, and EU was spicy. Is 100 Thieves the best team in North America now?
I think you've got to say so, really. Like, the same question could be applied to Heretics at this point. I think they beat the better teams in the region to get here, other than Envy. Envy, similar to FPX, just didn't really show up on the day. So, really, I think you kind of have to, because they beat Sentinels and TSM, which were considered the top 2 teams in that region. Do they have the better players in North America? Probably. Again, like individuals that make up a team, sure. Like you can look at Tens and Friends, even players like Wardell and stuff might not be necessarily surrounded by individual players that sort of match up to them. So I would say so. I pretty comprehensively would say that 100 Thieves are the best team in North America right now. But I think that's a good thing, because it does mean for champions, TSM, Sentinels, whilst I don't think there's going to be roster changes, can, get a bit of a kick up the ass to try and keep up with these guys.
Sam?
And that's the thing. I think that your top team should constantly be in flux. You never want one team to perpetually be on top. So TSM was on top, Sentinels was on top. Now 100 Thieves have smacked both of them and taken the crown. It's like Fall Guys, but Valorant, and it's just who can grab that crown, who's going to be the next winner. And we'll see. Do they manage to continue? For right now, yeah, they're the best. They beat the top 2 teams. Hats off to them. They've proven their worth, but can they maintain the momentum? That's the important part. It's not enough to simply knock someone off the crown, or knock the crown off of someone's head once, right? You got to keep doing it consistently if you want to maintain that spot. But as I said, we like that top spot to be in flux. It keeps things interesting.
Speaking of knocking the crown off of somebody's head, let's hop across the
Finally.
pond, where a lot of crowns were knocked off. Holy cow. I've just got the bracket up here for EU. I mean, this was pretty spicy. We had, all right, let's talk about it. Heretics in the finals. We'll talk about the first round in a minute here. The semifinals is where it really gets interesting. First round went exactly the way we thought it was going to go. Maybe exception was the Heretics Liquid discussion. I know there was some thought that it could go either way. I said Liquid was going to win it. You both said Heretics. I didn't know what I was talking about, apparently.
Yep.
Nobody really did, though. That's the thing. Like, nobody had really seen Heretics or Team Liquid. We only saw one best of 3 from Team Liquid, and it was against August, so it wasn't really too much to go off. And really, considering the backlash for Team Liquid, especially Soulcast, after that game, demanding that everybody apart from Scream be dropped, hindsight makes them look even more like dicks at this point, I think,
right?
Because they lost in overtime in the best of 3 game to the team that beat G2 and won the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
That is honestly one of the better performances. Like, if you sort of really take a step back, if you're Sliggy, you go, all right, I'm content with that. We had a close game against the team that ended up winning. You can't really say better than that. Like, if you're FPX, for example, which we'll get onto, you're going to be molding at that result. No wonder there's going to be changes in there. So, really, like, I hope people get off the back of Soulcast, I hope people get off the back of Yinsu as well for like,
Yeah.
she apologized for what she said and all that stuff. And I think she's got a lot of criticism on that subject. But Team Liquid didn't play bad. Scream got a lot of kills because that's how Team Liquid play. They were you just got Eccles following Scream around good. Yes, side, you want me to flash that? Okay, I got you, but there you go. Go on, go right ahead. That was literally their playstyle. So it's no surprise that Scream is twice the many kills as everybody else because everybody else is setting him up. That's the whole style. So as somebody that likes Team Liquid, that saw them as Fish 1, 2, 3, it's a positive step in the right direction. Considering all of the roster moves, I would be fuming if Team Liquid changed anything at this point. I genuinely think they've got a solid team here, and they're going to come out of this stronger.
Okay.
Their results from the last few months, like 3 or 4 months, Liquid have been looking lackluster for some time. We've spoken about it quite a few times. There's been talk about it, behind the scenes for quite some time. This is probably the best Liquid have looked in a long freaking time. And yeah, they lost to Heretics. As Ryan said, that's the team that won the whole damn thing. If Liquid lost to G2 in the quarterfinals, everyone would have gone, it's G2. But because they lost to Heretics, a team they didn't know, now suddenly it's a big deal. The desk was telling them, guys, Heretics is a good team, don't count them out. We were telling them, guys, Heretics is a good team. Even the casters were like, we think Liquid are going to win. But you know what, Heretics, pretty good team. And still, Twitch chat, I mean, it's Twitch chat, right? What are you going to do about Twitch chat? They are a bunch of...
Degenerates is probably the nicer way.
Thank you.
I mean, we're all
not
DJs here,
this
to be
Twitch
fair.
chat. Not this
Not
Twitch
this
chat,
one.
Brennan.
Twitch.
If
Oh,
you're
this is the
watching
best
this
Twitch
show,
chat.
we know you're a big brain Twitch chat.
You knew
Very
coming
big
into
brain
this,
Twitch
you knew
chat.
because you watched this.
We're talking about game day Twitch chat where there's 3 brain cells to rub together between the lot of them.
Lord.
But you guys in here, you're all cool. We love you. Keep coming back.
Especially you, Anders. You keep that shit up, man. Anyway.
I just think it's more unfortunate than anything else. Like, especially when you sort of bring up like the whole, because the thing that got people upset about the Insu thing is that they were saying that like, individually, Team Liquid haven't looked that good. If they do badly here, could you see roster moves coming in? That's the nicer way to put it. But she was effectively like, should they kick Soulcast? Because Mitch was talking about him specifically. It wouldn't have mattered if Soulcast went 89 and 49, like Scream did. Like, that whole point would have been would have been ignored. But it's more unfortunate than anything that Soulcast then went on to go 7 and 21 in that Bind game, which did go into overtime. He is playing Sova. He was one of the better raisers in the region, and he's had to fulfill a role that honestly everybody from Team Liquid has put off for quite some time. Playing the Sova, playing more of a supportive role. You've got Eccles trying to dine a dash to do, IGL, playing the Omen, playing the Breach sometimes, using the Op in some cases. I think that him and Link have to share some of the burden. Link's now been playing controller, which is great, and Soulcast has moved on. So there's no surprise that it didn't look as good when you look at the scoreboard, but he is fulfilling a role that is awkward for him, sure. I think Raucus had a very similar sort of performance, but the difference is that Soulcast is an amazing Valorant player at his individual skill. Raucus, because of that transition from Overwatch, not so much. But you've got to bear in mind as well that both these players are relatively new to the scene, and Soulcast especially has a lot more to show and has done in the past. So I really did want to stand up and protect him, my little babby, because I do think that he got a lot of unnecessary shit.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
that's our pitch for Save Soulcast. # Save Soulcast. Get it trending on Twitter. We're gonna like start a fund for his legal defense. But we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to the semifinals because this is where the real juicy results started to go down. First of all, the king of the region, G2, undefeated. The only time they lost a game, their opponent got disqualified. Undefeated to this point, lose to Heretics in the semis of First Strike. Wow. It finally happened. The region's finally interesting. It's taken so long, but finally there's drama in the games. Sam, you want to start us off here? What went down?
Bruh, LOL was running circles around David P. Like, that man was absolutely disgusting. I want you to cast your mind back to, like, OG G2. Like, before David P was signed, right? He was still a trialist. and he was their like flanky boy, and he would run around and do the lurking thing, and he would kill everyone and then heal himself.
No more lurkers.
Yeah.
Flanky boys.
Flanky boy.
Flanky
He was
boys.
the flanky boy. And that's a little bit of what I saw in LoL. And it feels like David P has started to play a little bit more safe. I suppose G2 kind of changing up their style a little bit. He doesn't really play that super flanky, dangerous play style, especially because of how Sage's heal has been changed. It makes it that little bit more difficult to play a lurker style. But LoL is just like, whatever. And he was even the MVP for that match. He played so freaking well. I was insanely impressed. I think only one person, maybe two people I knew, thought that, like, were certain that Heretics were going to come out on top of that match. And one of them is in the Twitch chat right now. But to everyone else, it was G2 all the way. And Lowell and Pora just showed up. They did what they do. And G2 just didn't stand a chance. I can't say anything more than that. I really think it came down. I think that I won't say that everything was on Lowell's shoulders, but I think that him and his Sage and how he played it was a massive pivot point for Heretics and some great leverage to kind of propel them forward and get them that victory. What a crazy match.
I do think that G2 really should be looking back at that Ascent game, especially because they were 9-3 up and lost 13-10. Like, that is supposedly G2's best map, and they absolutely fell apart. You mentioned David P. He was constantly ego and aggressively peaking on the defense and getting punished for it time and time again. To the point that attack pause came in, I assume Mike said to the team, yo, what are we doing? Just relax, stop aggressively pushing on the defense, wait for them to go in. The one round that they won was right after that attack pause, where they didn't push, they just waited. And then they started pushing again and started getting punished for the same thing. It was just a horrible look for G2. Bind was an absolute stomp from them. And Split, again, because Split's that kind of map, could have gone either way at that point. And a great Team Heretics ace came in from Nuki right at the depth to win up that match and give G2 their first loss in the best of 3. Really, if that game was played, we could have seen different results. I don't think that... I've seen a couple of cases where people think that G2 is now, after losing one best of 3, the third or fourth best team in the region. I think they're honestly still second. The only team that you could put ahead of them is Team Heretics, that had the toughest road to the finals and beat every team that came up against them. G2, still solid. I'm still surprised that they might be changing up their roster a little bit, and I'm surprised that they didn't take on Mike full-time, considering I think that he helped them a lot with their problems. So I don't really know. The point is that G2 are still a fantastic team, but Heretics just outplayed them on the day.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. So let's talk about the other major upset. Other side of the bracket. Summon FC, your favorite team in the world, Ryan. And and FPX and Summon FC came out on top. This time I am going to let you start things off, Ryan, because you're the number one fanboy. If they had a jersey, you'd be wearing it right now.
It's the battle of the brains, right, with them playing up against FPX. And really, it started off terribly. They got battered on by a split even, 13-4. Haven went their way because FPX have never really had a good relationship with Haven. Bind should be FPX's best map, but they lost 13-6. They looked so uncomfortable. And considering that both of these sides have been liberally using Viper on this map, I do find it odd that at the last moment, FPX doubled back and actually had Angel over on the Omen. Not even Brim. They just went for like a very traditional composition, and I don't think it really worked out at all. And you just saw like an individual great performance. Mystic on the Viper was great. He had so much impact. And really, so what I said before about like Heretics, I would now consider the best team in Europe, G2 second. Even with someone winning this game, I wouldn't consider them better than FPX. I don't know if that's unfair, because I feel that this is a great performance, and I think that someone can go toe-to-toe with FPX, but this is similar to Envy, right? Is the best way to describe it, that this is a team that shows a lot of promise, that you would expect to get into the finals and maybe win, that just fell apart when it mattered. They absolutely bottled it, and I'm a little bit concerned at that, considering this was their opportunity to win a tournament, and it didn't even involve G2 in that case. They lost to a team that really I don't think they should have. Summon, Fnatic, just pick them up at this point. Honestly, what the hell are you doing? I think they had a really good result. I'm glad that they actually didn't win, because I think in a really roundabout way, that could have been more problematic with First Strike, because you might get, like, they might be like, oh, we won First Strike, we want double for wages because we're that good. And then it sort of brings in some of, like, you know, like a Chinese monolith team that comes across like FPX that can afford that, but might not necessarily represent the players better because it's a different region. So I think that this is a good result from Summon that they can definitely take to the bank and trade it in for an AUG. A good AUG as well. Like, that's why I like Fnatic.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard someone argue that not winning an event was the best move for a team.
Well,
Sam,
I think.
Oh,
I just mean that there's crazy wages in the
I
scene,
get you.
and I think
I get
so.
him,
It's like,
yeah. I think the cutest thing that I saw is seeing how FPX have kind of adopted Summon FC as like their little brother team. It's really really cute. It's like Summon is little FPX. Angel has kind of taken Boaster under his wing, and it's really adorable.
Bargain FPX? I don't know if that's adorable. I thought his tweet said they were bargain FPX.
yeah,
Budget FPX.
Budget FPX. I thought that was a tweet. I thought that was more trash talky than adorable, but okay. Continue.
No, in a way, I do find it quite cute. Because there is a level of respect there, and you can see it. And I think it's deserved. Summon FC performed exceptionally well. I loved the Viper pick, but I've always been a fan of Viper. If you ever see me cast anything, as soon as we go to split, I'm like, so Viper? It never happens. So for that reason alone, I'm really glad that they performed well. I was absolutely flabbergasted to have seen that Summon FC beat out FPX. I really thought that they had it in the bag, and I don't know, Summon just showed up on the day. Maybe FPX underestimated them. Maybe Summon were just really hot that day, but they performed really, really, really well. And like, you know, we spoke about the Viper, and I think it was a really good look, particularly, God, what is his name? Mystic, yeah. Yeah. Played a really good Viper as well. I think there's still room to improve there, purely because Viper isn't a agent that we see too often, so there isn't a lot of like tape to review on that. There's definitely room to improve, but overall he played that agent really, really well, and I think that was just yet another thing on top of the fact that it's unexpected and some teams still don't really know how to play up against it. You add on to the fact that he played it quite well, and it was just a recipe for disaster for FPX.
All right, so that brings us into the final. Obviously, we've kind of already talked about the final a fair amount. Heretics, best team in the region. Ryan's already declared it. Sam, do you agree with him on that one?
I think to an extent, yeah.
No. You can't to an extent this. Are they the best team in the region? That's a yes or no question. I'll let you justify it one way or another. You can't say a team is to an extent the best team in the region. Either they are or they aren't.
So, look, if we look at the logic that we applied to 100 Thieves, and we said right now they won the tournament, they're the best team in the region, and I think you can apply that to Heretics. You know, they won First Strike, so right now they could conceivably be the best team in the region. They did really well, but I also think, and I'm gonna say this about both, or rather, the reason that I don't think it applies as strongly to Heretics is because 100 Thieves got to play both Sentinels and TSM. 100 Thieves, we only got to see them play G2. They never had a chance to play FPX. But I would like to see this in both regions. I would have wanted that to have been a double elimination. I would have wanted to see more games, especially out of a team like Heretics that we haven't seen a lot out of. So while, yes, to an extent, we can say they're the best team in the region because they won First Strike, I don't think I'm willing to kind of give them the crown wholeheartedly.
Okay.
I don't think I still believe that G2 hold that crown. Honestly, I don't think that like FPX gets the crown either at this point. I think it's now it's literally a game of Fall Guys. Everybody's kind of at the start line and everybody's trying to run for that crown. And everybody's kind of had a taste of it, but I'm not willing to give that crown to anyone just yet.
Finally, EU might be interesting to watch.
Hey,
how about that?
Shut up.
As if it wasn't anyway. Like, I am
like,
so.
Can you just
I know.
get out?
I know that Anders is in the chat, but I am so glad that we can get away from this fucking G2. Everybody else, like that can fuck right up. We're done with that completely.
Honestly.
Going into. Like 2021 is like a whole new ball game, and it makes me interested to watch G2 now, because I guess I don't know if we're talking about the roster changes now potentially, but it's like, how do these guys deal now that they've lost? I said this before, way back when, about like Fish 1-2-3. It's like the way that you separate Fish 1-2-3 from being a good team and a great team is how they respond to going on a losing streak. Like Astralis is the better example, where they were so good in Counter-Strike, not because they had one period where they won everything. They had one period where they won everything, fell off, went back to the drawing board, didn't change up their roster. They just started grinding and practicing again and got better, and then came in and started winning everything else again. That is the mark of a great team, and I would like to see G2 try and do that without actually throwing any plays away, which apparently isn't going to be happening.
Nope, they're already doing that. So let's talk about roster changes. Perfect segue here. Also, apparently there's been a rumor coming out from Nell in the meantime while we were live, new roster change. So we're going to touch on that as well, I guess, with NIP. But all right, let's start out. We'll start out with one of the semifinalist teams. We're starting out with FPX here. Meadow has been removed from the roster. Now this one was kind of interesting in the way that it happened as well. FPX obviously put out this tweet where we're saying farewell, blah 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 blah. He's no longer serving for FPX under mutual agreement. And Meadow then responded that he was surprised when he got the news yesterday. So not very mutual. But suffice it to say, he's out of the roster. FPX, they didn't show up on the day. We were talking about that, about, they still absolutely have a shot at being the best. This was their chance to make a tournament. Now they're making changes. Do we think this is premature?
Kind of. Okay. Well, so from an outside perspective, you would look at that and go, wait, what? What? But then when you kind of read the statement a little bit and you hear from, more people.
Oh, I think we just lost Sam. Nope, she's back.
You lost me?
No, she's back.
You disappeared for a second.
You froze.
Okay, weird.
All right, keep going.
Okay. Yeah, so after having, looked through the reasoning and whatever, and they spoke about how Meadow is a phenomenal player. And if you speak to Doom Bros, he'll even tell you, Meadow is insane. He's really good. But play style is important. It's not enough to have somebody who's playing like this and the team is playing like this. It doesn't matter how good you are. Synergy, it's important. It accounts for so much more than just individual skill. So while on the outside you can look at that and go, wait, Meadow out? What are they like not well? There's reasoning behind it. And I think that he will most certainly find a new home. I think I even saw Carlos from G2 making jokes about how G2 has a pool and there's no rules against poaching. So I would personally love to see Meadow on G2. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. That was even my first thought, which, we're going to get into this next one with G2 possibly making some roster changes. But as soon as I saw that from G2, I was like, whoa, Meadow to G2? So I'd love to see that. So I don't think that FPX are being super short-sighted, like, oh, bad results, get them out. They're actually thinking a few steps ahead and realizing something needs to change now rather than in 6 months' time when it's too late.
All right, so FPX playing 3D chess, according to Sam. Ryan, what do you think of it?
Yeah, I think certainly based off how much FPX have changed since we first saw them, they were, honestly, I think a bit lucky with how they did, looking back, considering how the patches, when you certainly go all the way back to Fabrican and stuff like that, all of the balance changes that came to benefit them more than anybody else. Breach buffs, they were one of the only real teams that ran Breach all of the time. If you're looking at NA and EU, especially, Shadow just got buffed. Sage got nerfed, they never ran Sage. It was just pretty much everything was working towards their one-trick comp. And I think the main thing that we saw from First Strike is how flexible they're starting to be now. We saw Shao moving over to different stuff. Zipan's always going to be raised, which I think is fine. But even Angel over on the Viper, the Omen, the Brimstone, that's the kind of changes that you expect and want to see. Meadow, I remember there was an interview on the Blast Invitational where Killjoy had just come out, and they asked him, like, are you going to play it? And he was like, no, because Cypher's just better. So I do feel that when they talk about the playstyle and all that stuff, I do feel there is a sense of Meadow not so much can only play Cypher. I don't think that's inherently fair, but they are looking for somebody like Pora, for example, who is seamless, that jumps between Cypher and Killjoy and has a distinct game on both of them. I don't think he's a bad player, but the idea that you just need like a Cypher one trick on your team can't happen anymore, because we saw with the recent changes how much an agent could just get shafted. I think that's one of the reasons why David P could potentially be dropped from G2 as well. That we're saying, oh right, Riot are not really screwing about with this. They might just nerf Omen. Then what's Kree gonna do? Angel's gonna be fine. If Raze gets nerfed, Zipan might have enough about him to transfer over to a different agent. If Cypher just gets deleted from the game, how is Meadow going to transition? My guess is not great. And I think that's one of the main reasons going into 2021, where new agents are going to be added. No doubt these teams will stay together for the duration of 2021. At least that's what they're going to be contracted for. That's an area where if they're like, I'm not sure about Meadow, they're better off just dropping them than going into that season the way that they are. So he's a great player. I think he's going to get picked up and do fine. But if FPX want to be contenders for Europe, they need to be much more flexible than they have been in the past. For everybody else apart from Meadow, I think it's showing.
Interesting take there. Well, we're going to keep going along in our roster rumor, because there are a lot to get to, and apparently more dropping all the time. This is the G2 one. So this is a report from Nell, who I'm very familiar with from Counter-Strike, Nell on Direct. He originally reported that both Pith and David P were being benched. Apparently that is just David P now is out of the team, but Pith is sticking around. He was apparently being shopped around, supposedly, but that didn't wind up happening. So he's sticking with the roster. David P out. What do we make of this one? Ryan, you want to start us out here?
Yeah, I'm not too surprised with David P, as toxic as that sounds. I don't think it's inherently to do with his performance during First Strike either, because I think he did fine. There's obvious flaws with his game plan, like I mentioned with Ascent, to pick up on, but ultimately I feel that he was just a slot-in player. It felt like he was always on trial. Even when he was officially signed back in the Ignition series, it still felt that he was not quite the core of the team. Piff, though, is an interesting one, because in a similar vein, you could say the same thing about Piff than I did with Meadow, but I think that he does transition across nicely. And if he's not going to be on G2, I could maybe even see him transfer to maybe a coach role at that point as well. That could be a nice addition. It's hard to say. I've always really liked him. I think that he's had everybody stacked against him from the get-go, because he is a lot older, hasn't had the same success really in Counter-Strike, that a lot of people saw this move and went, I don't know, that doesn't look all that good. So with that in mind, I think he's done a tremendous job and should still be on this team. David P, his breach wasn't really that inspiring. Sage was great, but Sage is very different now, unless you're Lowell. But I don't think that's something that G2 can go, oh, Heretics do it. Let's just do what they're doing. I don't think it works that way for them. And so I could see them maybe picking up some other bright kid, your EU version of Asuna or Dicey. Or actually another thing that they wanted, an IGL, which is, again, I don't know who you would sort of bring in. I know Strong's mentioned Feku from Exile as a potential one. I don't know if that's a rumor or that's just him being big brain, but generally I feel that that's a good place to start your G2.
I remember there were concerns around David even during the Ignition series in those very, very first tournaments when he was still trialing for them and everyone was like, you can't not sign David at this point. He was one of their top frags. He played exceptionally well. He was really good on his agent. You can't not sign David. And this was about the time that some of the very first Sage nerfs came in. And a lot of people were saying, okay, he did well, but what is he going to do when Sage gets nerfed? And the nerf was never big enough to really push him off the agent entirely. He was still able to play it at a fairly good level, even when other teams weren't playing her as much. But the nerfs have continued to roll in. And the only other agent we've actually played or seen him play on has been that Breach. And as Ryan says, hasn't been super inspired. He performed well. I think the first time I saw him on it, I can't remember exactly when that was, but the very first time I saw it, I was somewhat impressed. But as the games kind of continued and as other teams started using Breach more often and as you started to see more play styles coming through, you started to realize that David P actually wasn't playing it as well as he could have been. He wasn't improving at the same rate as the rest of the players. And so we saw him, as time progressed, going back onto that Sage despite all of the nerfs. And now again, Sage is going through even more changes. And you add on to that the fact that he's had to change his playstyle so drastically because of the nerfs. And again, it's that this is kind of the only agent that he really can play. Again, it sounds terrible. It's kind of what we were saying about Meadow with the Cypher, right? You need to be able to flex onto some other agents or you're not going to have a place in the team. Now, for the moment, he's just benched, and we've seen players come back from the bench. Skadoodle is a fantastic example of that. In fact, somewhat parallel. Skadoodle started out on the Sage in beta and made his way through, and now he's playing Jet, and he's absolutely dominating. I don't see a world where David P replaces Mixwell, but there needs to be, like, some sort of similarity or similar vein where he finds a new agent that he can find a home on. Because if he doesn't, then things don't look good for him and his G2 career.
Apologies for that popping up. So
wow, shame on you.
We're gonna have to jump through a couple things pretty quickly here. First of all, Purple Cobras have been released. That's or not released. They weren't
disbanded.
A team. They weren't an org. They disbanded.
They just disbanded.
They're going their different ways. They're gonna try and find orgs, gigs somewhere else. Obviously, they made it to First Strike. That was quite the achievement. They didn't do anything at First Strike. They lost to Summon FC, eventual finalist, but still a bit of a bummer. I'm just gonna kind of skip over that one, to be honest. I don't know that there's too much to talk about. We've got rumors coming in about NIP that just dropped, so let's talk about this. NIP are signing JD, Lucker, and Safe are both being benched. Kriya and Rhyme have been extended.
Safe?
Yeah, Safe has been benched, apparently. According to a report by Nell as well. Let's. I'm gonna need just a couple minutes. Hot takes on it. Hit me with them.
Yeah, I don't think Safe is. My guess is that Safe wasn't benched. My guess is that he's gone somewhere else. Where he's gone, I have no idea. Like, he's not going to G2 because he's not an IGL. He doesn't fulfill that role. You would be stupid to put him on a Sentinel agent for FPX, even though I think he'd be a good fit for that kind of team. Maybe back to Guild. Who knows? Like, I genuinely do not. Unless there's some like roster being built, but kind of like I said before, I think teams would be insane to try and individually put together a roster now for 2021. It's just. I don't think it's possible. And if you do put together some of the best team with the best free agents, I do think it's going to start the Champions Region 2021 stuff very disappointing. And then you get what's happening with NRG where they just kind of like second guess everything. So my guess is that Safe has gone somewhere. I don't know where, but I guess Guild might be the most obvious choice maybe. And then they drop some of those Counter-Strike players. I don't know.
Safe going to a new team would make the most sense, but I am kind of always in the camp of take leaks with a grain of salt. Even Halo, whose leaks have tended to be fairly good, I always take them with a grain of salt. I mean, if you looked at Nell earlier today, he was like, David P and Pitt benched. And then he came out a few minutes later and was like, oh wait, actually no, it's just David P. I thought Pitt was going to Guild. That's not happening. JK lol. So this is why leaks tend to be something that I don't put too much stock into. If it is the case, then I don't see a world where Safe just gets benched or kicked. It has to be like an offer, or he himself was just like, this isn't the right fit for me, which would also be kind of weird. But either way, like, I don't see a world where he's just getting booted. Aside from that, I think you said, was it Lucker that got benched as well? Mm-hmm.
That's not too surprising. I don't think.
Yeah, that's not massive. That's something that I can see happening. So that, sure. But again, grain of salt. Not sure I believe them just yet. I'll wait for the official announcement.
The JD move is weird though, because he's usually a Silver/Jet player, which could replace Looker. But if he's going on to Silver, then Rhyme would have to change up. Like Rhyme on entry, maybe that to me doesn't bode much when it comes to confidence. But like that's just typical Ninjas in Pajamas, just not really getting the pieces that they need. Their engine's broken on their car, so they buy a fucking portable DVD player to try and cover it up. That's how Ninjas in Pajamas seems to work. But like, yeah, it's just stick to a roster. I don't think Nip even did that badly, all things considered, in this tournament. So yeah. Like, what they had is fine. Just stick to something for longer than 2 months, please. You're doing my head in.
We got to blitz through here, though. So, speaking, you mentioned NRG a little earlier, and also not knowing what they wanted to do. That's our other conversation to talk about across the pond. Kohler is benched from NRG. A little bit surprising to me. He really did not seem to be the problem. He's also one of the only players on the roster who's genuinely experienced in Valorant, as opposed to trading off of what he came through from Counter-Strike. I'm just going to talk about this one a little bit. I suspect they're probably going to bring over another CS player, if I had to guess, based on what I know of NRG and what they've done in the past. And there's a lot of CS players who are becoming available as organizations are dropping everybody in Counter-Strike. Yay, my scene is dying.
Hooray.
I'm so sad.
Lucky.
But
Welcome to Valorant.
But it does seem like this is a little bit of a strange decision for removing Kohler, and I just don't get it.
And going for Shanks as well, like that. I feel like that's the football manager approach, isn't it? Really, just get the better player, slot him in, and then just put Kohler somewhere else, as if Kohler wasn't one of the most improved individual players across First Strike. Certainly from where NRG started in the Nerd Street tournaments to getting to the main qualifier in UMG, he was the step up. A lot of players did, but moving him to a different role, I don't know what they're doing. I'm not a fan of that at all.
Sam,
I suppose
quick thoughts?
I don't.
Quick.
Yeah, I don't have too much, to be honest. My only concern is who do you replace him with?
Let's see. I can name a couple Counter-Strike players. Let's see who just became available. I don't think Zepp and Vanity are making the switch. Leaf might be coming out. There's some names. There's some names out there if they're pulling from the CS pools. There's definitely some names available. I think this is gonna have to wrap up our show here.
That's fine.
Oh, also, yeah, I'm seeing some people suggest Moose in chat. The Orgless 5 boys did disband, so those players are all available as well. And apparently they disbanded.
Disbands make me sad.
Well, they disbanded because players got offers from playing organizations, which is what led them to disband. So that would imply that some of them are headed towards rosters. So a Moose would make sense. There's a lot of potential there. I do like some of the suggestions that are coming through from chat. But we are going to have to wrap up our show here. We were on a finite schedule, and we're way over that time, as always.
As
always.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, follow Nerd Street Gamers here on Twitch. Follow Nerd Street Gamers on Twitter. Follow these lovely people at their ats, which are down below their faces. You can see them right there. They're definitely worth a follow. We'll see you next week. We air every week at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays. Bye-bye for now. Love y'all.